Hey everybody, welcome to the Purpose People podcast. Today I've got Greg Turnbull from Langford and Turnbull. Is that correct?
Well, Langford Turnbull, but that's
Langford
fine.
Turnbull.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to get it right.
It's a bit of a mouthful, so.
All right, no problem. So Greg, thanks for taking some time out to join us on the sofa and on the podcast. So today we're going to talk a little bit about your role as a wealth manager.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you were at school, was that the thing you grew up and you wrote down and said, I want to be a wealth manager? Or what was the aspiration when you were growing up?
Well, it's a good question, and it's really funny, actually. And just as an aside, I'd say I feel there's an awful lot of pressure that's put on kids to have it all figured out middle of GCSEs. You know, the teachers are saying, you know, what are you going to do? These GCSEs are the most important exams that you'll ever sit. And I actually came into wealth management or being a financial advisor pretty late on in life. So I'll be 48 this year. And I think it was around the age of 32, 33 when I thought, this is something that I'd like to do. And interestingly, I didn't even know that financial services existed as an industry.
Wow.
I thought that if you wanted to do anything financial services, you had to be an accountant. That was all that I knew kind of existed as a financial advice industry. So it certainly wasn't an aspiration as a kid. Yeah. In fact, when I left school, I went and did a sports science and physiology degree at university, so completely unrelated.
Yeah, of course.
And then when I came out of university, my industry background was sales for about 15, 20 years before I came into what I'm doing now.
Wow. So from your perspective then, you obviously taking the aspects of leaving school, and did you go further education wise, or did you go straight into a job? What was the
I went and did so I did the conventional route. So I did GCSEs as it was in my day, and then A levels, and then university. So back then when I was studying, the perceived wisdom at the time was go and get a degree. It doesn't matter what degree that you get, just get one. Because if you're a graduate, then your starting salary will be maybe $3-4 grand higher than somebody that's not a graduate. So I didn't know any better, and I thought, okay, well, I'll go and do that. Well, what can I do at university? I really like sport. So I did a sports science and physiology degree, which was fantastic. It was great. But I see a lot of graduates now as well. And, you know, my wife and I, we have 7 kids between us, and 2 of them have done the university route. And you do come out of university, not everybody, but I think a lot of graduates come out with a degree of entitlement, thinking that this degree entitles them to walk into some kind of high paying job. And you quickly realize there's this catch-22 where you've got the degree, but you haven't got any experience. Yeah. And employers want a graduate, and often they want a graduate with experience. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of figuring out that takes place when you come out of university. So, I went the conventional route, got a degree, and encountered what a lot of graduates encounter leaving university. Okay, I need a job now. And I remember answering. This shows how old I was. I remember answering like a tiny little advert in a.
I thought you were going to say a telegram.
A tiny little advert in a newspaper. And I ended up going for this job interview. And it was some kind of weird network marketing sales role. I ended up with a job for 6 months selling gas and electricity contracts door to door back in the early 2000s.
So sales was like you're on the front line of sales, really.
100%, yeah. So forever removed my fear of door knocking, but it was an awful job. 100% commission. Yeah. There I am, fresh out of university, knocking doors, trying to get people to change their gas and electric contracts. So it wasn't exactly an auspicious start.
I remember it with my dad, like always answering the door and these people knocking on his door, and my dad would like, I don't want to change. Yeah, that was me. Leave me alone. Yeah. It might have been you. Yeah. But and I think that way of sales, it's almost turned, nowadays it's turned into LinkedIn DMs.
That's right.
It's the same thing, but it's just.
This was early days, early doors. Yeah,
early doors. Yeah. So from your perspective then, you kind of like, you're on the front end of sales or whatever, so you're dealing with rejection almost immediately, aren't you?
Yeah. You are. And back then, that first 6 months was 100% cold calling. So we used to, because I used to live in West Yorkshire in Leeds. And I remember we used to, in the centre of Leeds, there's this big place called the Corn Exchange. Yep. And there's some offices down the side. And we used to rock up, first thing on a Monday morning. And it was some weird kind of American sales kind of process as well. And we'd all turn up early doors, and we'd get given our map for the week, which was our patch for the week, which is basically a printout of the local A to Z. and just go around here and just knock doors on every business that you can find, and try and get the business. So it wasn't.
What was your conversion rate? Do you know?
I don't even remember what it was. But
like
if you
200 doors and one sale, was it?
You basically kept going until you got your target for the day.
Oh right, okay.
And then what you would have to do is you go back to the office at the Corn Exchange, and we'd all stand in a circle, and they'd ring the bell. Everybody would ring the bell who'd done their quota for the day. I look back and I think, man, what the heck was I doing? But it was a good grounding.
But that's, and I think that's it. When you're older and you look back, some of those things do set you up for, because no matter what business you're in, you're still going to have to cold call in a sense. Maybe not knock on someone's door, but there's an aspect of having that first conversation with someone that you've not met before. So,
and I did go on to better things after the door-to-door selling.
So tell us a little bit about that then.
Well, so from there, I ended up working in recruitment for a couple of years. Where you're basically selling people. You're trying to sell them into the job and sell the job to people. And then my dad, he'd worked for Xerox for about 40 years, man and boy. And I ended up working for Xerox for the next 5 years after that. So that was a really good grounding in terms of sales training and process and overcoming objections and how the sales cycle and sales process actually worked. Because there is method to it. It is almost a science and a process.
You almost become a psychologist to some degree.
You do, yeah. And I got really interested and really fascinated in the whole process of the selling cycle. And I read a lot by a guy called Brian Tracy. Yeah. He's kind of an American guy. He's in his 80s now, but he's kind of like the sales guru. Have you?
Yeah.
Wow. So I love Brian Tracy. I read all his books.
Eat the Frog, isn't it?
Yeah. So advanced selling strategies, the psychology of selling, all of that kind of stuff I found really fascinating, because quite often in sales particularly, there's a bit of a stigma attached to it in the fact that, you say sales, people think used car salesperson, or when you go into a sofa showroom, if you've ever done that, you're pounced on by at least 2 or 3 people that follow you around, wanting you to put the business with them. And so there's a bit of a negative connotation with it. But, and maybe you'll lead into this in a little bit, but the sales background lends itself fantastically well to financial advice, but in a different way to that which you might think.
Yeah, I think the aspect of sales for me is the shift of mentality that, because I find a lot working with entrepreneurs, they're really good at delivering the service, but they hate selling.
Yeah.
And I find a lot of my time educating them go, no, it's serving. If you're really good at what you can do and you're better than the next guy, you're going to serve them as a client much better than somebody else can. Yeah. So if you approach it from the aspect of, I'm here to add value and serve,
100%,
it already takes that, it always takes that constant apologizing for, oh, sorry, I got to charge you this. Sorry, I got to. No, if you're good and you're worth it, people are willing to pay.
That's right.
And what I find is that when you're dealing with, it's not to be detrimental, but when you're dealing with low ticket jobs, often the expectation is they want more and more and more and more.
That's right.
For less and less and less. But if you end up working for the clients that you want to work for and they value what you are, price is not normally an issue.
That's right,
They just know that you can get the job done.
Yeah.
And thankfully we've got clients like that now.
Yeah.
But that wasn't always the case.
Yeah.
And occasionally we'll get one that resurrects, or we've tried to help someone out, and sometimes we look at it and go, well, we've helped you, but at some point you either see the value, or we're going to have to, to sit down with you and educate you, or hand off to somebody else like a freelancer that can actually help them, because we're an agency and we got those costs. So I like the fact that, from a sales perspective, where you need sales to grow a business. In fact, sales solves everything. The more sales you have, it solves a myriad of problems. I've got to pay this, I've got to pay that. I'll tell you what, sell more and we'll be much better. Now, obviously you can increase profit, but in the short term, selling solves. So for me, having that background, certainly as an entrepreneur like you are now, is a massive advantage. Massive advantage. And Brian Tracy, bless him, I think we met him online with Intrabiz, and then he got some questions, so I gave him a few questions. But he was in this room full of books. It was almost like a warehouse full of books. There's books all behind him everywhere, whatever. But just a lovely guy, and I think they booked him for 30 minutes, and he spent about an hour and a half with us.
And he started from nothing as well. Yeah, and just hard graft. And there's so many great things that he's introduced. Eat the elephant, eat the frog.
Eat the frog.
In other words, do the task that you least want to do first.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I've never really been in the situation of having to cold call as such. But I do know lots of people that do that. And one of his exercises is he would set himself a target of 100, and he would call 100 people. Well, not 100 people. He'd want to get 100 no's as quick as he possibly could, on a sales process, which is a completely different mindset.
Yeah.
So, but just going back to your earlier point that you mentioned there about, I can't remember what you said about the sales and having the clients that you want to work with.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of time to grow in confidence to get to the point where you are confident in the service and the value that you provide. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I certainly have done this, suffer a bit from imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Because when you get good at what it is that you do, what tends to happen is you start thinking, well, surely everybody knows this. This can't be that difficult or complex. But you often forget what it is that you know, and the journey that it's taken you to get where you are, and the frogs that you've had to kiss along the way, the stripes that you've had to earn, as it were. Yeah.
So the whole thing of imposter syndrome, and so for me, that's where I kind of flip it a little bit. I'd say, well, if you know that you're supposed to be doing it, like as in you're living your purpose out, and you're really good at it because you're now maximizing your skills, talents, and abilities, there's no need to be an imposter, because you're aware that this is the very thing you're put on earth to do, so to speak. So often where that imposter syndrome comes from, and you're not completely aligned head and heart. And so by aligning you from head and heart, like as in what you really want to do and what you're actually doing, if you can make those two things align, it's like a superpower.
Yeah.
Because then you're going, well, I'm meant to do this, and I'm going to get the right type of clients.
Yeah.
And people pick up that confidence. And it's not, you're not like trying to, brush something over someone or deceive them. No. This is who you are. Yeah. And it's either you go with us or you don't go with us. And if you choose not to go with it, that's fine, because I know my skills, talents, abilities will add more value to someone else. And it took me a while to get there, because you're right, you're perfecting your service, you're seeing the impact levels or whatever. But what I've realized now working with entrepreneurs is that's often the thing, is that, are you meant to be doing it first and foremost? Are you certain this is the thing that you want to do? And I think those that can answer that then find, the confidence to do it.
I consider myself really fortunate, because doing what I'm doing now, I absolutely love. And the reason I love it is I feel that it marries together and blends together really well the skill set that I have. And the skill set that I have is partly, I've educated myself, but there's also some natural inherent traits that I possess just by birth and by personality that lend themselves incredibly well to what I do. So what I mean by that is, when I was in my season of sales, so I fell into sales straight out of university, and then I went, a couple of years in recruitment, 5 years working in Xerox, and then a couple of years working for an employment law firm. And what I discovered during that period of time was, well, there's a couple of things. And it really sort of came to the fore in the 2 years that I was working for an employment law firm, because if I backtrack to the Xerox days, you were always under pressure to hit sales targets. And your reward for hitting your sales target, of course, would be your on-target earnings, a commission payment, but then you would have an increased target next year. So you're always on this treadmill. You're going and going and going. And each year, come the 1st of January, you have to start from scratch all over again. So it's like big breath, and here we go. You're flat out for the year. You get to the end of the year. Maybe you've had a good year. Maybe you've had a mediocre year, and then your target goes up again next year. So I started work for an employment law firm after the Xerox years, and that was the most crazy sales job I've ever had. Like the way that they structured things just put such a psychological element to the whole sales process. It was nuts. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. We were basically tasked with selling employment law contracts to business owners. It was business to business. You could earn really good commission on it, but you had to go flat out. So you had to do, I think it was something like 20 new contracts a quarter.
Wow.
And if you did the 20 contracts a quarter, you would get 10% commission on what you'd written. I think the target was about 200 grand. So, it was a 6-figure sales job a year if you did the numbers. But what made it really difficult, or psychologically challenging, was there was maybe 100 sales reps, and we were all divided into teams. So let's say you had a team of 10. So in our team of 10, and we all had a work BlackBerry. At the end of every single day, an email would come out showing your team of 10 and who was where against their target.
Wow.
So what that meant was the pressure increasingly built over the quarter if you weren't up there. So what would happen? You'd always have, Billy Big, whatever, by the end of week 1 had already smashed his target.
Yeah.
You were still languishing on one contract. And then as it went on, if you didn't keep up, the pressure would build and build and build. And then to compound it, every quarter, you would have a sales conference where the entire sales team gets together. It was a mandatory overnight stay at a hotel. And then there was an awards presentation the next day. So it was so visible where you were. So if you're doing great, fantastic. And if you weren't, then everybody could see. Yeah. But what I found in that period of time was what I didn't like about sales. So I'll give you an example. What would often happen, I would find myself sitting with a client like we're sitting now, and we might be together for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And over that period of time, quite often you'd build a rapport with that client, and I'd like this client. And what would sometimes happen is I would think to myself, actually, the service and product I have for you probably isn't the best. You could probably do something elsewhere that would be a little bit less expensive, or you could probably wait and you won't actually need this. So you have that conflict, or you have that dilemma, because alongside that, you also have the feeling of, but I need this business because I've got to hit my target.
Yeah.
And so that dilemma was a horrible place to be, because it doesn't reward integrity, or you don't do yourself any favors if you say to the client, and at the same time, I was young, I had bills to meet, and it's like, I could really do with this, and if I don't, I'm so I hated that. I really hated it. And at the same time, I would often, when I was signing up a piece of new business, have feedback from the client. Oh, we trust you, Greg. You've got a really trustworthy face, and whatever. And there were times when I had to walk away from the business and say, look, just be honest. And it was never the case that this wasn't any good for them at all. It was just more that you could probably do better over here with a competitor, or, But
it's an interesting one, because, the amount of times of, I talk to a lot of people in retail and, car showrooms or whatever else. And even in from the hotel and hospitality, that you almost become a victim of your own success. Like, you have an amazing year, and then the next year, and you smashed it out the park. Yeah. And then we add an extra, we want another 10% of the following year. And it's like, so wouldn't you rather you'd had like 5% less to make it easier the next year?
That's right. And sometimes what you would do is, if you had that business in the bank, as it were, you'd hold it over until the next year, and then you start the year strong.
So me, naturally then, that leads to a point where you're going to hit a cap.
Yeah.
And then what happens?
Yeah.
Because you can't maximize it anymore.
And also, you're not building anything for yourself.
Yeah.
But just to finish the story, whilst I was in that 2 years working for that employment law company, at the same time, and you remember I said at the very outset, I didn't realize that the financial advice industry existed as an industry.
Yeah.
I knew that if you were getting a mortgage, a mortgage broker might come around to your house and try and give you the best possible advice. I didn't understand about pensions, investments, retirement planning, and the need for advice in those areas.
Yeah.
So at this time, whilst I was in this other sales role, I was reading all sorts of books, Robert Kiyosaki, I was reading, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I was reading Automatic Wealth and 7 Years to Seven Figures and How to Build a Business and all this entrepreneurial kind of stuff. And I was thinking, well, how do I get there? And it was about this time that I knew a guy through church, and he was very successful. He wasn't flash. You wouldn't have looked at him and thought that he was very successful, but I knew he was top tier at what he did.
Yeah.
And I would speak to him, and I'd ask him, I'd pepper him with questions. At one point, and he'd share various things with me. And at one point, I asked him if he'd mentor me, if he'd tell me what he did. And so we ended up meeting and talking. And I remember when I was reading those sales books, I read one definition of a sale which defined a sale as a transfer of enthusiasm. And this guy was so enthused about what he did. I couldn't get my head around how he could be so passionate about, financial advice. And he would explain to me about what he did and about how the clients benefited, and that it's not about selling a product or service. It's about explaining to the client what their options are, and then the client making a decision about which route to go. And it was just, I said, really? And so you talk about how he was saving clients, hundreds of thousands of pounds, particularly in the area of inheritance tax, and how he would do that and how you got paid and how the business worked. I said, this is amazing. And he used to come around to my house and train because I had a home gym in the garage. And one day he was around and he was actually doing a set of squats, and he was out of breath and he'd finished, and he had his legs up on my garage wall. And he was just talking. He just started opening up to me about the business and the journey that he'd taken to get there and how successful he was now. And I couldn't believe it. And he said to me, do you know what, Greg? He said, if you got your exams, you'd be really good at this. I said, do you think? He said, yeah. So anyway, the session finished and he went away. And I then rung him up the next day or the day after, I can't remember now, and said, did you mean what you said about me doing the exams? Because he said to me, if you got your exams, you do really well, you could come and work for me. And he employed about 15 people at that time. And I said, can I take you out for lunch? I want to talk, find out more about it. Maybe we end up going to Nando's, your favorite gaff.
There we go. Yeah.
And anyway, so we got there and he explained a bit more. And I basically said, look, I need to know it's not a throwaway comment and that you're serious, because if you're serious, I'm going to go and do all these exams. Wow. He said, yeah, I'm serious. So long story short, whilst I was doing that employment law exam, I enrolled with the Chartered Insurance Institute, and I ordered the course books, the textbooks, and I learned everything from the textbooks. I sat 10 exams over an 18-month or maybe 20-month period. So I'd do my job during the day, I'd study in the evening, I'd shout at the kids because they were small and they were running around upstairs and wrecking stuff. No, they weren't. They were great. But I studied, I passed all those exams, 10 of them, and I got the, back then it was the diploma in financial planning, which was the base qualification you needed to have to be able to advise clients. And so long story short, I ended up working with him, and I was there for 5 years. And then that season ended, and then I did another 5 years with another firm. And then 5 years ago, I made the decision to set the firm up on my own. So what was the shift? Because obviously you're working for somebody else, and obviously having read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and stuff like that. Did you have that in the back of your mind that learn? Well, what happens is, and particularly this industry, so when you start off, and not everybody might be like this, but I was like this, my confidence wasn't, super high. Yeah. And it's a funny one because people will often look at me and say, oh, you seem really confident and, you're going to do really great. And I'd often get this feedback in sales jobs. And I didn't do really great, probably for some of the reasons that I've talked about. And, confidence is an inside job, and, how you present isn't necessarily an accurate reflection of what's going on in the inside. Yeah. So when I started off in financial services, my confidence wasn't super high. But what happens is that there comes a point when this penny drops, and when you start looking at, actually I'm quite good at this and I'm quite successful. And when you start looking at the numbers, and when those numbers are good, you start thinking, hang on a minute, if I did this for myself, this is what I would be taking, and this is what I would be building. Because with the 10 years I spent working for other firms, obviously you're growing their business, but you're not growing your own. Yeah. And actually, all that you need to do to be successful is you need the framework around you in terms of a business structure. Yeah. But the actual skill set is within. It's your ability to generate new clients. It's your ability to generate trust and provide good advice and have the technical competence and so on and so forth. Yeah. And then it's just a case of stepping out and doing it. But as I say, the penny does drop at some point, and you look and you think, "Wow, I could actually do this."
I mean, and I think there's ways to look at it, because there are some people where you look at and you go, "Yeah, that's naturally they're going to transition into doing it," and there are other people that are like going, "I don't really care. I want to just do this without all the hassle of running a business and growing a business or whatever." But I think when you read books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and things like that, you've already got that mentality there. You're just trying to figure out, how am I going to get to that point? You know, how am I going to, I buy into it, but I don't know how to make the transition. And I think some people, for example, they start their first job thinking that's the whole thing. Now, if you start your working life knowing this is an education, that learn as much as you can,
that's right,
to build the thing you want to do in the future, I think you'll get so much more success from that, because I think people let work happen to them. They just do it, and then 5 years go by, 10 years go by, and then maybe I should make a change. But if they entered the workplace and say, right, I want to be here, but for the next 5 years I'm going to do this, and the next 5 years I'm going to do that. And one of the things I've chucked out there as an idea before, in football, for example, you sign a 5-year contract. So you sign a 5-year contract, and at the end of the 5-year contract, maybe the year before, you negotiate if you're going to stay for another 3 years or another. And I wonder if the employment system changed that way, that we'd be more accountable for the results on both sides.
Yeah, quite possibly.
But if you sign people into contracts, so I'm going to go and work for this, we sign a 3-year deal, great, you get what you want, but you need to make this in order. It just makes the whole thing look like, so if at the end of the 3 years they decide it's not right for either party, there's a natural moving on. Because as an entrepreneur, you hire someone and they're with you for 10 years, and eventually they want to do their thing, and then you're like, oh, but that is natural to life, right? They're not going to work with you. They're not going to work with you forever. But I think for me, that contract thing, and I've never really explored it in any great detail, but if you took your first job and it's a 5-year deal, at the end of the 5-year deal, you decide you want to renegotiate for an extra couple of years or whatever, it just creates more touch points and more questions along the route to see if this is really what you want to do, or go, no, I've actually done that part of what I need to do. Do another 3-year deal with these guys, another 5-year deals with this, and the next 20 years are going to build what I want to build. I mean, just for me, that would change the landscape of education.
It would. What I'd say on that is that for employees and people going into jobs as well, there's a lot about what they ultimately do that's determined by their mindset. So what I mean by that is, I don't know where this comes from, but it's probably because I was scarred by the sales roles that I had, and having to hit targets and just being on that treadmill. And I had a real fear, and I still do to some degree, I guess. I don't want to get to late 50s or early 60s and be having to work, being on that treadmill, because I really value freedom, as we all do, especially in terms of time, and not being beholden to, I was going to say not being beholden to a boss, but not being beholden to, you have to do this, and you have to show up at this time, and you have to do it this way. I really don't like that. I don't like being told what to do in that type of sense. Now, I still have a regulatory obligation to my clients, to the FCA and to all of that. So it's not like I'm completely, just want to do things how Greg Turnbull wants to do them. That's not the case. What I don't want is something placed upon me that clips my wings and tells me you've got to do it this way when I say you have to do it. In sales, for example, you've got to turn up for those monthly sales meetings, which half the time is just a complete waste of time. And you're at those sales meetings because the sales manager has to report to, their boss, and their boss needs to have the numbers, and it doesn't serve the salesperson. And in sales particularly, you don't need usually to motivate salespeople. Salespeople, by definition, usually are motivated because they're in sales because they want to earn over and above what they might earn in a a fixed salary. Typically, by personality, they're driven individuals, and when they're not performing, they know they're not. You might need to have a sales process to filter out the dead wood and those that aren't trying and putting in any effort. Of course, but
I think I look at it this way. There's 4 steps to a career. You first launch into it. Okay, so you launch into the career, whatever that is. You go for it. The second step is you begin to learn it. So you learn and you get better and better, and you take those principles, you start applying them, you start seeing the results. Then you get a position of leading. Naturally, sadly, if you're there for 10 years, you get given a place of leadership. Doesn't mean you're any good as a leader, by the way. But if you are good at what you are, you've learned enough, then leadership will come. And then there comes that legacy piece. And I think what you're talking about there is that between leading and legacy is often where the questions start to appear. So what often happens, someone's leading and they start going, oh, I probably could do this myself, but I don't know if I can or whatever. But then they're looking for other options. And often that place of leadership leads to another company. So they leave and they go to another company. They then launch into this new career at a higher level. They then learn at a higher level. They then lead at a higher level. And then comes back to that legacy question and going, and I think those people that are wired that entrepreneurial way get to that and saying, you know what, I've come to the conclusion that I want to do this myself. Yeah. And eventually and that's the legacy play. And so some people that follow that trajectory make that leap into legacy. Other people get to the point of leading and they go, you know what, I'm happy. I've got my 2 dogs, 2 cars, semi-detached house or a detached house, a gated driveway, and that's all I want. Now for me, because the way I'm wired, that's like, I couldn't think of anything worse.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Because I just feel that that's not the impact that I want in life. That's a beautiful looking life that it's just for you. I feel the way I'm wired is I want to do more than that. And I think that's often why being an entrepreneur allows me to impact more and go in different directions as opposed to I'm going to do one thing well, pay the mortgage off, get the key. And there's nothing wrong in that. But as an entrepreneur in the way that I'm wired, I lead with impact. I want to make impact. I want to help people discover purpose. Once they discover purpose, how to build a life around it, because that's what we've done here, And so, but that's not for everybody. But I recognize that entrepreneurs, and I think salespeople are, some degree, frustrated entrepreneurs. They're just looking for the vehicle to launch into. And thankfully, you came across wealth management, and like, this is it. This is the thing that I could plug into and build that life.
It married all the skill sets together. And when I talk about sales expertise, I'm not talking about some psychological way of manipulating people. It's very basic stuff like moving the advice process on. So for example, if I've met with a client, it's a first meeting, usually I wouldn't finish that meeting without agreeing what the next step is. So I'll come back and see you in a week's time. I'll do the research. We'll get together and do such and such. So that's sales 101. At the end of that first meeting, we agree the next step before we leave. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, real basic 101 stuff. But you'd be amazed how many people would have a client meeting, leave, and then ring them in a week or two. There's no agreed next action, and there's no kind of follow-up process. You have to, in my mind, have the meeting and we agree what it is that we're going to do next. That's basic business.
Yeah, and again, in my early days, it'd be similar like that. I would have a meeting and then go, oh, I didn't book that meeting, or even worse, I would send them a proposal on an email, and then try and get hold of them. Yeah. Where the best thing you could do is book the meeting, and that second meeting is taking them through your proposal. Yeah. And then at the end of it, you've got a fair indication of which way you want it. So it's like a 2-call close. Yeah. But I've learned that the hard way because I didn't know that. So it was like, oh, I've sent them the quote and they haven't got back. What's wrong with them?
And it's other stuff as well. So for example, I always become very nervous internally if during a client meeting I hear my voice a lot. If I'm the one doing all of the talking, then I feel the meeting isn't going well. Yeah. And a lot of people that sort of don't understand sales think that salespeople are just trying to talk you into doing something, and it's not. No. A good salesperson asks questions and then sits back and listens and lets the client tell them everything that they need to know. So if I hear myself waffling on, I will quickly change the subject or ask a question and say, tell me about such and such, or what did you mean when you said, because I want them talking. And that's how you best serve clients. And it's about positioning yourself in the meeting when you're going in and saying to yourself, I'm here to serve. I'm here to give the best advice that I can, because the money follows good advice. We're not trying to sell a product or a service. I'm here to explain these are the options open to you, Mr. Client. You decide for yourself what you want to do at the end of it. So it's...
Well, it's kind of like, because sales is a sort of like another one where you know that questioning. So good. I'm sat there now, having read Brian Tracy and all this. I'm sat there going, I know what you're doing. Like
this is true. Yeah, because I'm a salesperson's worst nightmare, because when you turn up at a car dealership, you're there because you want to buy a car. So a good salesperson should immediately be able to qualify exactly what it is that you're after. But if you've got any kind of sales background or training and they start asking these questions, you know what it is that they're doing. Oh, you're just pre-qualifying me. And depending on your mood at the time, you either go along with it and help them get the sale, or you think, I'm not going to play along.
Well, it is funny because a friend of mine, I'm not going to give him away, but, like having done all that and learned all that, and they got a deal, and eventually I got a deal. Because ultimately they go, well, do you want alloys or do you not? So if you say you don't want them, and then they cost it all out, and then afterwards you change your mind and add them on, then obviously it's going to go up in price. But if you had said that from the outset, the chances are you'll get them thrown in for much less. It's those sorts of things that you learn, right?
Yeah.
But I remember like going through the process or whatever, and then they said, oh, you get there. I heard that you're getting a new car. I went, yeah. He said, you know what? I'll go and have a word, see if I can do, as a mate, because we're no mate. I'll see if I can get you something. Anyway, they went back and they come back to him and they said, tell him, he said, he's got a better deal than our staff. And I just laughed, and he laughed as well. But because I knew the way it works, I took time to figure it out, because it is, I'm going to act on what you tell me.
Yeah.
So, and that's the first thing of sales is like, listen, then you can serve and meet the need.
Exactly.
But if you're clued up, it's like you go in there going, oh, I want this, and I want it for this. Yeah. There's no wiggle room really for them.
That's right. Yeah.
To get what you want. But that journey of sales and that sales prep and that is like, I was very good as an art director and in brand and all that sort of stuff. And I had to learn sales, and obviously got a bit older and a bit wiser, and you could realize that, hang on a minute, I'm giving like 30 years worth of knowledge away for free.
That's right, yeah.
And hang on a minute, let me put that in a workshop. And now we impact people with a Purpose People workshop. We spend 4 or 5 hours with them in the room, and that 30 years of knowledge and whatever comes. And you realize when I first started out, they were just getting that for free. They were almost getting all that information in the first 2 meetings.
It's growing into that understanding of the expertise and the skill set and the knowledge that you actually have, and being confident in it, and overcoming that imposter syndrome to a degree. Because I think it takes a little bit of a while to understand the value that you actually possess in the skill set and the career that you're in. Yeah. And
talking does that though. Like if you get opportunity to speak, I think if you speak on stage, or you do a 15-minute. I mean, I started off doing like 10 minutes in a BNI meeting, for example, and I took over. I'm
doing that tomorrow.
So I took over the education slot. So it was good because every week then I'm delivering the education. Yeah. And occasionally, and this is where I started to realise, so occasionally people say, well, you can put some other people in the education slot, which I wanted to do. Yeah. But then everyone can go, oh no, it's just better if you do it. And I thought, oh, hang on a second. Yeah. So you're enjoying what I'm educating you with. And, 365 or whatever it is, I think it's a year that you're there, and you're giving all this knowledge, and then people come up to you and go, oh, I didn't know that. And it goes back to what you said. People don't know what they don't know, and that's you're telling them, and then they're going, wow, that's just changed. And you're like, really? Yeah. And then you start to realize that you do possess, with experience, a lot of information where you can serve people, and then you're less apologetic, and then you have that confidence.
And also that the skill set is the ability to communicate, in my industry, technical stuff in the language that the person understands and can relate to. Because whatever field or setting you're in, you have to be able to build rapport, demonstrate credibility and technical competence and all that kind of stuff, be empathetic, listen well, read between the lines. There's a whole craft there which is beyond just the technical aspects. And I don't know everything there is to know about financial services. I know enough to understand where there is an advice opportunity, and I'll oftentimes say to the client, I'll do a little bit more, research in this. I'm not 100% certain on that area, but we'll find out. So you have to have a degree of authenticity about you when you're speaking to a client, because one of the things that you realize very quickly in sales, and you'll know by experience yourself, and I think people generally understand this, is that most people can smell inauthenticity or desperation, or you just want something for yourself a mile away. Yeah. And so that in and of itself is I don't know whether it's a skill or just whether it's a maturity or a character issue or whatever it is. But you have to be able to present well and sort of get under the skin and get them to trust and embrace what it is that you're saying. And you'll know this from what you do as a business leader and in speaking.
Yeah, I would say that it can come across as being inauthentic, but I think it's just confidence, that there's a lack of knowledge. And so if someone's got a lack of knowledge in an area, rather than like you're saying, I'll go away and do research, they try and answer the question. And as they're answering the question, they're drifting further away from the boat, and they can't swim.
One thing you must never do is blag.
Yeah.
Don't blag. Like, you don't ever do that, because you destroy your credibility, and it's
that's it, exactly. And recognize where your strengths are, and recognize in your team where the strengths are. So, for example, I work tech, so I've got a software company. If I don't know, I go, look, I don't know. I'm not technical, although I understand tech. Let me get back to you, speak to the tech team, and then I can come back to you. So we had an issue the other day on something, and somebody else worked on the project after we had made it live or whatever, and something had gone slightly wrong. And they went in and they just and they were like, oh, I don't know why that's happened. And we're like, well, it shouldn't happen. Anyway, we've gone back in, we've gone through it, and we found out that the reason why the issue happened is because someone else worked on it.
Yeah.
So we literally go, the reason we know is X, Y, and Z, but I couldn't say that, like just women, and say, oh, it's their fault.
Yeah.
No, let me get the facts first and confirm it. And then we've gone back and we go, this is actually why. And they're like, oh, okay.
And that elevates you so much in the client's eyes, because things go wrong, but it's your ability it's how you go about correcting the wrong. And you can do that well, or you can do that really badly. Yeah,
because the thing is, most people aren't technical in that sense.
Yeah.
So when you understand that tech, once it's alive, it's a living, breathing thing, and with updates, with browser updates, with phone updates, with different phones, there's going to be nuances that go, which is why you have like a support contract, because you've got to anticipate those things and make adjustments, you know. And sometimes tech goes wrong spectacularly, like Barclays. You know, people haven't not been able to access their accounts for 3 days. Now, it would be something small. There was an oversight, or they've uploaded a patch or whatever, and they fix it, and now they know never to do that again.
That's right, yeah.
But unfortunately, that's the world of tech. If we're going to move everything digital, then and we're all digital, then things like that will go wrong. So you ended up becoming a wealth manager. So do you just want to explain primarily what wealth manager's job actually is?
So I'm a chartered financial advisor. So it's independent financial advice that I provide.
Yeah.
So what that means is typically the areas that I advise in is people, private individuals that have an inheritance tax issue that they want to. Yeah, farmers. They have an inheritance tax.
There's a whole industry right there to go door knocking.
I often describe inheritance tax as a voluntary tax.
Yeah.
Because it is possible to, quite legitimately mitigate the vast bulk of it away, but you do need to plan for it. So there's and for clients that've got an inheritance tax issue, most of the time they don't understand what their options are and what they can do.
Yeah.
And it's a complex area of financial planning. So what I do in those situations is say, this is the position that you're in now. So if you died tomorrow, this is the tax that would be payable.
Yeah.
These are the options that are open to you in terms of how we would mitigate some of that tax.
Yeah.
And half the time and half the battle is just understanding what your options are.
Yeah.
So inheritance tax is an area I get involved with. Retirement planning. So people that are coming and approaching retirement, they don't know whether they're going to have enough income.
Yeah.
They've got pensions. They don't understand how the pensions work or what the options are with the pensions. People that have sold a business.
Yeah.
People that won the lottery. Any of those types of scenario is where I would get involved. So I would typically meet with that client. We'd look at the position that they're in today, and then we'd look at where they want to be. And between where they are today and where they want to be, there's usually a gap. And that gap is where our advice comes in. And that advice is to usually, these are the options that are open to you. This is what we need to do.
That's an interesting one, because with the lottery winners, do they contact? Because not many people do they? They just go nuts.
Well, depending on how much you win on the lottery.
Yeah.
So Camelot have it's not Camelot now. It's been bought, I think, early last year by a company called Alwyn, an American company. But I call it Camelot because it's easier to pronounce for me and to remember. But Camelot if you win over a certain amount in the lottery, Camelot appoint a winner's advisor to you.
Okay, good.
That winner's advisor will introduce the lucky winner to both a solicitor and a financial advisor. So the challenge is getting on the Camelot panel.
Yeah.
So I've met with solicitors in Cardiff, actually, that have dealt with multiple lottery winners over the years.
Omaze would be another one. Get on there.
Omaze, yeah.
Get on there. Thing.
So lottery winners are given by the lottery provider access to professionals to advise them on their options.
Yeah, because obviously it's been going on long enough now where we've seen the newspaper, I won like 5 million and now I've got nothing in the bank.
Like it says in Proverbs, an inheritance quickly gained will not be blessed in the end. And history is replete with people that have blown absolute fortunes. And we say in our business, or I say in my business and on my website particularly, and I think it was Robert Kiyosaki said this, but it's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep.
Yeah.
Let's look at Mike Tyson. Tyson, he had 400 million quid at one point in his, or dollars in his career. And then he ended up, 100 million, what's the word, bankrupt.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump tells a famous story back at when he lost all of his money. I think he says he was $95 million in the hole, something like that.
Wow.
And he says he was walking down one of the streets of New York, and he said to his wife at the time, "See that homeless man over there?" And she said, "Yes, poor person." He said, "That homeless man is $95 million richer than I am."
Wow.
So it's not...
It is perspective.
It is. It's not what you make, it's what you keep.
I remember 50 Cent, or 50 Cent, depends how you say it. 50 Cent.
Yeah.
He was bankrupt, but one of his team bought Bitcoin. So he cashed in his Bitcoin and then got back to where he was.
Really?
But he wasn't aware of it.
He'd
given them the mandate to just go and invest in different things, and they obviously took a chance on it. Didn't think too much of it, and then it, transformed him. So he wasn't worth 50 Cent.
But to me, it's like, and to you, it would be inconceivable. How can you have 400 million? If 400 million is earning just like a pittance of interest a year, it's enough to like live on for the rest of your life, to never...
It's legacy money, right?
For forever.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
Well, I was listening to someone the other day where they were talking about the aspects of footballers going to Saudi to play. And I can't remember his name. He used to play for Wycombe Wanderers, quite a big, strong guy. I think it's Akawande. And they were all going, you wreck your career and this, that, and the other. You've had 4 years in the Premier League, and then you've gone off to there, and what you're doing or whatever. Yeah. And the guy, Akawande, had this amazing comment. He said, "It depends what your play is." He said, "If you look at this particular individual, I think it's Ivan Toney. He's done really well. He's got an England cap. He's got at 27. He's done brilliant to get to where he needs to get to. Now he's got two choices. He can push on and be elite, which he's got another couple of contracts maybe at that level, or he makes a legacy play." And he said, "I believe he's made the legacy play, as in he's had a great 14 years or whatever, or however long he's been in it. But what he's decided to do is to say, for the next 4 years, I'm going to build my legacy." And so he's gone there for generational money, which, you can debate whether that's ethical or not ethical, whatever. But he said those 4 years that he's going to do, he might not be now perceived as a Premier League great, but in 20 years' time, who cares?
Absolutely.
And he's going to have that money for his grandkids and their and their kids and so on and so forth. He said that ultimately, football's a very small career, and it's one injury and it's all over. And I think it's getting people to understand that the legacy play, that is to be wiser with our daily decisions, because we can't work forever. And before you know it, you've worked your life.
And the thing is I don't know whether Brian Tracy said this or somebody else, but nobody was ever heard to say on their deathbed, "I wish I'd spent more time in the office."
Yeah.
It's very true. And when you talk about legacy as well, it's for me, legacy is, you see, success for me and business success is having a wife that loves me, it's having a good marriage, it's having children that love me, and having family that like being around me.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to sacrifice that for billions in the bank. And I know people that have been at the top of their game in my industry. They've got all the toys to show for it. They've got the holiday home, they've got the beautiful house, everything wanted for nothing, but they're divorced, and their children are now, I don't know what they're doing. To me, that isn't success. I'd rather have far less and have, family together. Was it profit a man if he gains the whole world that loses his soul?
Exactly.
So what are you doing it for?
And it's interesting because you say that with authority, because you mentioned that you've got 7 kids, so there's 9
we're a
of you together.
big blended family. You know, so we have a really interesting dynamic in the family, and we all get on very well.
Yeah.
You know, my wife loves me. So if she was here, she'd tell you she thinks I'm great.
Yeah.
You shouldn't really say that without her being here to sort of back it up, but you know,
we'll put it in the show notes.
Put it in the show notes, yeah. And the kids all get on. The 7 kids all get on. We're one big happy family.
Yeah.
And that's all that really matters, because it's what are you working for? You know, we talk about legacy, and of course, I believe as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, even as an employee, you have a responsibility to make as much money as you can to do good things with it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about making as much money as you can to stick it in your bank account and then you know, open your banking app and look at the numbers. It's what are you doing it for?
It was an interesting one. So in Humans, which is the sort of like personal development stuff, which I'm running with Ollie Reed, one of the exercises we got in this thing called Game Plan. So you can go on the Humans website, Humans spelt with a 4, and you could download Game Plan, and it says goodbye to the previous year and then to embrace the new year. And obviously we're in sort of like January, February time to be able to do that. But one of the exercises we do is like pick the best 12 moments of the year. And what I find is you open up your phone and you go to the pictures and you're going, oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
And it was great. And I remember that. And that was great. It was great. But the key thing that Ollie points out is that when you were there in that moment that you did that thing, there were a million reasons not to do it. And there are a million reasons not to be present in it. But when you look back in the course of a year, you go, actually, I should have been even more present in that moment. Because that's how you judge your life, by those moments.
That's really true. That's actually a really sobering good point, because just yesterday evening I was sat on the sofa at home, and I was on Snapchat. I only downloaded
Snapchat now, Greg.
I downloaded Snapchat a few years ago because all the kids were on it. It took me ages to figure it out. But anyway, Snapchat brings up memories. Yeah. You know, like I know.
Facebook does. And
So it brings up memories. So we were having a laugh looking at some of the memories that had come up, and you look back at those moments and you think, wow, that was a good day. That was a really funny moment. That was great. Didn't we enjoy that? Didn't we have a laugh about that? And you know, the one that we were looking at yesterday is it was a summertime, and my wife Simone and the girls, when they were younger, we were up near Bolton Abbey in the River Strid. Yeah. And it was a summertime, we were up to our ankles in the water, and we were catching crayfish. Yeah. And so the kids were screaming, you know, trying to catch them with their hands, put them in the bucket. You know, Simone was screaming, and it was really funny. Anyway, we caught a load of these crayfish, and we took them home, and Simone cooked them. She made this beautiful seafood spaghetti, and we took a picture of it because it looked amazing, but it was absolutely gross because all those crayfish were pretty much inedible. They had all this kind of like stuff in them, but they looked like proper langoustine things. Yeah. But anyway, to your point, it was a really good day. It was a fun. Yeah, it was a fun time, and
but a sobering thought is that for me was that whenever you go and do those things, there's always unresolved conflict. There's always a challenge somewhere, and ultimately it's to reconcile to yourself that unresolved conflict will be unresolved. You can't leave the day perfect. You can't go away on holiday with everything done.
That's right.
But you just have to do it because that is life.
That's right.
And I think so many people pot off those things because everything's not perfect. I can't do this because it's not perfect. But actually, it goes back to when you think of wealth, you could earn more money, you could have a bigger house, you could have more cars, you could do But you have to make a decision to say, you know what, actually, I'm going to be a good steward of what I've got. But the biggest thing of that is the people that you're with, not the money.
And that's a really good point, because there comes a point in your business journey as well, when you get to a certain level, when you decide who you're going to work with, because experience in life tells you after a period of time, that person's going to be a nightmare.
Yes.
I actually don't want to deal with you. And so you become picky and choosy about who you're going to have on board as clients. So I'll speak to everybody that I'm introduced to, but not every client will I take on, because you just know.
And that's it. And for me, that's the ultimate for like whether you're an imposter syndrome, understanding who you are, like that journey, understanding who you are, what you can do, how you can build. And then exactly that. You see patterns and you their key phrases like become red flags. Yeah. You know, occasionally I'll get some clients we did some work with, whatever, and then they call and they're like, okay, we had one the other day. I had an amazing experience with them. We literally built their whole thing up. We handed it over. We exited well. We helped them build a team and they took it all on. we exited well, right? So I've got I can go to sleep at night and go, we did our very best for them. But hey, they're not our client anymore. Yeah. Anyway, I get a phone call the other day saying, hey, Daryl, I haven't seen you. We want to come and talk to you again. Yeah. That door's always open. And I'm like, brilliant. You know, because that's ultimately our intention, that everybody we do work for, we better. But unfortunately, historically, we've had people in the past that just want to take the mick, and you recognise it. And as you get older and wiser, which plus 30 odd years now in the bit, that you spot them. You spot these things, and it's not you're second guessing. You go, no, like things for me, a red flag for me. I want to make as much money as possible. Already, I know that's going to be a problem because every cost that we put in is not enough, and the times are always yesterday, and because we've got history, we can see the patterns. They're disorganised. They haven't got any time. They want half the team spend age. It's just too much stress. You know what? Don't worry about it.
But when you were starting out, you would have taken that client on in a heartbeat because you need the clients.
Which is where most of us entrepreneurs are. When we start off, we take everything that's thrown at us because beggars can't be choosers.
Exactly.
And that privileged position of being able, and I think that's how I see it. It's a privileged position where you can begin to choose the type of clients that you know you can work. And for me, that's the flip. For me became, where can I be most impactful? How can I deliver the very best impact to that individual, to that team, to that company? And I go, if I can't, then I'm doing them a disservice for even being involved. And so often I'll have that conversation. Do you think we're offering you enough value? Well, yeah. Great, then I'm fine. You know, it's always good to check in. Are you getting enough value from us? Can we help you here? And by nature of who we are as people, we will empower some of the companies we are to do some of the tasks that they would pay us to do in-house. Because financially, it makes sense. Why? Because I often see that we're almost like been appointed as custodians for their brand as well. So because we're custodians for their brand, we can actually help them get to where they need to get to. But sometimes you don't need all this stuff from us when you've got someone in your team that can write. We can just help you by giving you the SEO terms. That's what we're about. So Greg, what does next look like in the business and where you want to take it?
Well, for us as a family, and for myself as a business owner, and where we're going, really for us, it's just organic growth and to continue servicing clients that we want to look after and can do a good job for. So I think I mentioned to you, my family and I, we relocated from West Yorkshire to South Wales in August 2024. I've got a lot of clients, they're in the Leeds, Harrogate area, and a lot of professional connections who for me are predominantly accountants and solicitors that refer clients to me. And I'm still getting work from them. But for us at the moment, the goal is really to replicate that in South Wales and to continue building, the professional connections, the accountants, solicitors. And we're just steady away. We're in a good position. So we're looking just to grow. We're not going to take over the world, but we're good at what we do, and we're enjoying the process. And
So, how would someone reach out and get in touch with you then? If you've got a website, is it LinkedIn? What's the best way?
Yeah, they can contact me through LinkedIn. You can find me Greg Turnbull. My contact details are there. You can also go via the website, which is www.langfordturnbull.com. You can see what we do there and the services that we provide, and you can contact us that way. Or they can contact you, Daryl, and I'm sure that you'll be able to put them in touch. So, a myriad of ways.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to spend, talking about all kinds of things and your career journey, because I think there's a lot of people out there maybe hitting around like 30, 32 going, I don't know what to do. Is it too late? And I think what you've shown is it's not too late to make the change and make a pivot to go and do something that you really want to do. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Purpose People podcast. How you can help us is to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Google, and Amazon. That helps us get our message out there to help people go after their dreams, double down on it, and be successful in life on their terms.